the roof is flat-ish because most of the precipitation in New Mexico is snow. So that means that the snow can melt, you know, because it's being left exposed to the sun, and then the water drains down here. But in this country, most of our precipitation is in the form of rain, as we're all very aware, although that's a distant memory now. And so if you have a flat roof in that scenario, then it means a lot more of the water's going to get evaporated instead of flowing down. So it's not really ideal for this climate to have a flat roof, or where most of your precipitation is rain. Also, I would rather have a pitch roof because you can have a second story here. So for your design, the footprint of your building, you could have an upstairs, like a lightweight upstairs, you know, straw bale and timber frame or whatever. Get more out of your space. So this is a prime example of where something that's appropriate in another climate has been built here without thinking about it, and it's not so appropriate here. The other important thing is that the material that the roof's made out of has to not poison you. You know, it has to be inert. So this is a powdered steel. All this is in your books, by the way, that you've got, and that's EPDM rubber. I think that's the right order. And a good place to look up which materials are appropriate is the British Rainwater Harvesting Association. I think that's what they're called if you just Google that. But also you could use slate or clay, that's fine. Any sort of natural material is fine. Even, you know, concrete is fine. There are other issues with concrete, but just make sure you're not using something that's going to put chemicals into your water. The other thing with water treatment is you want to start with the cleanest source possible, so that rainwater is good for that. It's better than, say, trying to turn your sewage or grey water back into drinking water, 'cause you have to do a lot more to it. So what happens is it goes from here, and then there's this pipe underground. The whole thing's gravity fed, so the next stage is always lower than the one before. And under here, we can't look inside, it's locked, but there's a Visey vortex filter, which is just basically like a mesh filter, and so there's the gravel there. It's like a coarse filter to get leaves out and debris like that, and then this is a bit smaller, so it gets smaller things out. And then you've got your storage, so you store it before you do any significant treatment, rather than the other way around. Because in our homes, like, water sits around in the pipes, but it's got chlorine in it, so stuff doesn't breed in it. But this is just rainwater, so it hasn't got anything in it to stop things breeding. And then once you've filtered it to drinking water standard, if you leave it sitting around, things could breed. So you actually need to filter it just before you drink it, rather than filter it, store it, then drink it. So here we've got 4 EcoVat tanks. They're each 5,000 litres. And there's pictures in your book of when these go in. So they go in at quite an early on stage in the build, just before you're backfilling the earth behind the buildings, quite early on. They're quite difficult to retrofit, so it's better to have too many than not enough. You can have, some people have concrete water tanks, or if you're doing it on a real budget, I've seen people use, so you know, like when orange juice is transported overseas, it comes in these big, I think they're 1,000 litre black barrels, and they're obviously food grade because they're able to cope with the really acidic orange juice. So I've seen people use them. So these are all on the same level as each other. The water inside is all at the same level. They're all interlinked. It is possible for them to overflow just underground, and that's fine as well because you get any kind of debris off the top. So this is designed, this system, for 2 to 3 months of drinking water.
Really?
and water for a family of 4, I think it is. But because you'll be using water saving methods, that's actually an enormous amount of water, and you can use it for irrigation and things like that as well. But you know, we don't know what's going to happen with the climate and how dry it's going to get or wet, so it's, you know, it's good to prepare for if you've got a long dry summer and have a bit extra. An advantage of them being underground is it's darker and cooler, so less stuff will breathe. And people have said as well, could you incorporate that in the thermal mass? But the trouble is it's moving through your building, so you'd be heating it up and then losing the water. So you have that on the outside of your insulation, it's not part of your thermal mass. But it depends sort of what you're using your water for. I mean, the majority of people who harvest their own water use it for everything but drinking water, because you have to go to such high standards with drinking water, whereas you don't need to think about it as much. If you're just using it for flushing your toilet, washing your car, watering your garden, then you don't need to think about whether it's underground or not, and the exact filtration process.
So do you use this for drinking?
Well, so what's happened, until a few months ago we did, but as I was saying, because it's a public building, we get the environmental health testing it every month, and of course, because you know everywhere in Brighton is plumbed into the mains, they only had one building that they needed to test, so they were quite on the case. And one of the things you test for when you test water is called coliforms, or coliforms, and it's how much basically poo particles are in the water, and there's an OK level, and then there's beyond that. Now the interesting thing with water treatment is, say like if you go to India and drink the water, we would get really sick, but someone in India might be okay, or you know, even closer to home in Europe, because you're not used to the bugs in the water, so it's not a black and white thing. It's not like you could, you know, if we drank the water we'd all get sick. In a public building you've got children, you've got people like elderly, people with compromised immune systems, so you get more vulnerable people. So you need to have to really make sure that your water's okay. So you meet plenty of people who go, well, I drink from the stream or the spring and I'm okay. I drink from a barrel in my garden that's off my tin roof, I'm okay. They might be, but someone else might not be. So there's these strict standards in public buildings, understandably. And because of how our roof is, I think like a fox or a badger must have got on there and done a poo, basically, or even like bird poo. You know, it's turning the water into like it's got a bit of sewage in it almost.
So they tested it,
yes, they tested it and they said no, you can't drink that. So that's why there's all signs around the taps. That's why the bathroom's locked, so that because it's a public building, anyone could just wander in and go, oh right, yeah, I'll just wash my hands, because you don't think, why would you think about it when you're used to just using mains water? You just assume stuff's safe, and chances are you'd probably be alright, but we have to act on the safe side. So until we change our treatment system inside, which I'm going to show you, then you know, we have to just say no, you can't drink it.
So you have to change the treatment system, upgrade it, or something?
Yeah, well, I'll show you.
You're going to show us.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Inside?
Yeah, inside. So shall we go back to any questions? Module, or the one. So that's what Mike Reynolds calls it, and this is as it would be if you bought it straight from Earthship Biotecture. So there's obvious issues with doing that, in that you have to transport it over from America when there's a perfectly good water treatment system being sold in this country. So That's one issue. The other is like getting it fixed and getting parts for it and things like that are difficult if it comes from America, and it's quite expensive.
Carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Travel costs.
So what happens with this is, so you've got the water in those tanks, and then it's piped underground under the building to here, and then it does need a pump to pump it around at this stage. So the water comes in there, and it goes through a fine mesh filter, and then there's the pump there, and it goes through then an even finer mesh filter, and these need to be exchanged sometimes when they get all clogged up. And then all the non-potable water is, so for the shower and washing up, things like that, then comes out of this pipe there, so that's deemed enough treatment. And then there's a drinking water tap, so for the drinking water tap, it then goes through a carbon filter, and then it goes through a UV filter, which isn't really a filter, it's a bulb with electricity going through it that kind of zaps any bacteria. So everything else is just, it's got really fine pores on it, and it doesn't let things go through it, it doesn't let the bacteria go through it. But what that does is it actually kind of disables the bacteria so it can't breed. And then it goes through a ceramic filter. So there's an old ceramic filter there. So it goes in the outside and comes out that pipe there. I don't know if you want to have a look at that. And that just works by having really fine pores on it. And they don't come with spiders. Sometimes you can get that out and give it a scrub when it gets a bit clogged up, but eventually, sort of every 3 months or so, you have to change it. Same goes for the bulb on the UV filter, you have to change it every so often. What we're going to do to fix the situation when we can get some funding, so I don't know if you heard us talking about the funding issue. The reason there's issues with this building at the moment is because there's a 12-month break clause in the lease, so you can't fundraise if a fundraiser thinks that you might have your building taken off you in 12 months and the project might be over. So the project's having to fight this clause in the lease before they can raise the money to replace and sort out things such as this. That's why there's problems with the building at the moment. But once that's sorted out and we get a bit of funding, the solution that's been agreed is just to get a much bigger UV filter, because they're really effective, and although they use a small amount of electricity, they do the job really well, and you know that all the water will be safe then, and we won't have problems like we do now where we can't drink the water. So that, and they can have a little light on them that says when you need to change the bulb and things like that.
Does they only turn on when you turn the tap on or something, or does it on?
I think, yeah, I imagine, although I'm not sure, but I imagine, yeah, it's only working when water goes through it.
Yeah, going through it.
So you're not using it now?
So no.
So where do we get our water from?
So that's from the tap over there, which is connected to the mains.
Amazing.
Which is, yeah, it's a shame, but it's, I suppose it's an important thing to learn from about your systems and how complicated you make it and how effective they are. There's another good book from CAT Publications called The Water Book, and that tells you all about water treatment and what's appropriate for different circumstances, and it's actually quite a constantly developing technology, so there's new stuff coming on the market all the time. The one thing you need to think about is sort of the maintenance it requires. How often are you going to have to replace parts of it? Like, and also the other thing with this system is it's really slow, because no matter how much pressure you put into it, once it gets to the ceramic filter, no amount of pressure can make it go any faster through those tiny pores of the filter. So the Mike Reynolds' answer to that was to get a 6-barrel one, like a big gun. But obviously there's more of an environmental impact and more bits of it that you have to change. So yeah, we're going for the UV filter.
So that's what you guys are going to do, just replace the UV filter for a big one?
No, replace the whole system
The whole-
with a UV filter,
Okay.
hopefully.
So that means you'll be treating all your water with it, even though you could be using it for flushing loos and shower.
Well, it's interesting. So the loo is flushed with the grey water, which I'm going to talk to you about. But yeah, so the other uses of water we have in here is the taps that the washing up and showering is what this goes into. So let's say showering and washing up, you need a certain level of treatment anyway, because although with your shower it's just steam, your lungs aren't anywhere near as resilient as your stomach, so you don't need as much to go through your lungs to make you ill as you do through your stomach. So just with it being a public building, we thought that was simpler, but and then grey water for the toilet. So yeah, that's that system. Any thoughts or questions? So it goes through the sinks, we wash up, and then it gets poured down the plug hole and goes. Then you want to see what the grease and particle filter is made of, or can you guess? So it's like something tied around that pipe to take any bits of coffee grounds.
Old pair of tights, isn't it?
Yes, it's an old pair of tights. Or no, well, a new one, because you don't want any holes in it. Or one that you're not using anymore that doesn't have holes in it. So that, because if you have like grease and bits of coffee grounds and things going in, the system will get clogged up. The plants don't process the grease, so you need to take those things out. That's tied around the pipe, that all the plug holes lead into that. And then this box has got holes in the bottom of it. So it goes through the holes, and then all this along here loops round to be connected to this planter there underneath the entrance there, and moves to that end there. And what you've got under here is essentially like a ditch, a lined ditch with gravel at the bottom, and then sand, and then topsoil on it. And the sand stops the topsoil going into the gravel and clogging it up. And again, it's biological treatment.
It's in the book?
This is in your book, yeah. And this is quite standard earthship design. The plants are kind of eating up the nutrients and using the nutrients, and it's fantastic for them, and also being watered. So they're using that, and what they don't use carries on flowing through the gravel round to that end.
And you can plant any plant?
Well,
Or specific plant?
Where are the nutrients coming from again? If it's just
so
water?
from the grey water, so from like washing up,
Potato
you-
peelings and things like that.
yeah, well,
Good
yeah,
food
like if
yeah.
washing yourself as well, or I don't know, like old tea that you've tipped down the sink. So it's water that's been sort of active, washing food off your plates. And actually the thing about there being nutrients in, you can't leave it sitting around because it'll get smelly and stuff will breed. So ideally you'd have a pump sort of moving the water around, which we don't have here.
I was asking what plant, any plant.
Oh yeah, sorry. That I am going to go through that in more detail tomorrow when we talk about the food section. But basically, it's an alkaline environment, so nothing that's like acid loving is one of the key things. So no like berries, things like that. And anything that just likes it being quite warm. It's like a bit like a tropical environment. So always wet at the roots. But yeah, I'll look at that in more detail tomorrow in the food bit.
Okay.
So a lot of people might think, well, I like this is great, but I'd like it a bit smaller and just out there. But the trouble is, Mike Reynolds says that you should have 2.3 metres squared per plumbing fixture. So you can't, if it was smaller, it wouldn't be able to cope with the amount of water going into it. So that's why it is as big as it is and why it has to be quite big. Now, so then at the end, that grey water that's been treated just gets used to flush the toilet. But if you have a compost loo, then you don't need to perhaps make it so complicated. You could still use your grey water to water your plants, but I don't know, if you're building it yourself, you have to think a bit more carefully about the plumbing, and it's an extra effort in your build, and you need a pump at the other end to put the water into the loo. But if you just had a compost loo, then you wouldn't actually need it to be quite so complicated or quite so big necessarily. So that's just some, personal preference thing.